This was mine.
Do you want to admit that? Are you sure?
I do want to admit it, and unfortunately the pot fell and broke, so I'm not going to save this pot. But I brought it in as an example of the saying, a dry rosemary is a dead rosemary. And if you go for 2 weeks without watering your rosemary in the house,
that's what you get.
This is what it's likely to do. And with this plant, it's time to say goodbye.
Oh, yeah. And you couldn't even use this for cooking at this point, or could you? Does it still?
I suppose you could, but I have a fresh, wonderful rosemary at home,
so why would you?
Why would I do that? That's right. I want to talk a little bit about jade plant. We have this one to pot up, right? Whose plant is this?
No, that.
You can do someone else's if you just want to tell me.
Well, we'll just talk about what to do. But I want to mention, because this gentleman brought a picture of an overgrown jade plant. First of all, she brought this in with these lovely pots, thinking that they might go in here.
Sorry for the noise.
But the problem with these pots is no drainage hole. Never put a plant in a pot with no drainage hole. And if you get one in a pot with no drainage hole, you have to water very, very carefully.
Yeah.
Of all the plants that might live with no drainage hole,
that is not one of them.
The succulents are not one of them. No. That's right. So, we would say that if you're doing something with this, to put it in a clay pot rather than, you know.
And
yeah.
That's probably too big.
Because, and this is the other thing about jade plants, the size of the root ball in relation to the size of the top growth is very small. You're going to see. And the this is very dry also. One of the things that often happens, especially when it's potted in plastic, is it gets very tippy because the root ball is small compared to the top growth. So this would easily tip over. It'll be happier in clay. And it'll be more steady in clay. It's not going to tip over as much.
That little one right there?
This pot is the right size for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can put that one back.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, I just wanted to say that these plants can get very large. And I've got one in my house that's probably about this tall. And it's this big around.
And magnificent.
And the trunks are thick.
Yeah.
And mine actually blooms every year as well. And it blooms every year because we leave it outside into the fall with the decreasing hours of daylight and with the dropping temperatures. And then we bring it in and put it in a sunny window, and the plant says, it's spring, and it's time to bloom. But sometimes these plants get so large that you need to do something. And the best thing, if you need to make a jade plant small again, is, let's pretend this is a big trunk, and I'm not going to cut this, but if this was a really big trunk on a plant, I could just chop that off with a serrated knife somewhere there, and I could take and I put it in another pot with cactus mix for soil, and just put it in there. You could put rooting powder on it if you wanted, but it's probably not necessary.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I do.
Yeah.
It roots very easily. So
roots
the
very
rooting hormone.
easily. Look at me.
I have dirt on my nose, thank you.
Rosemary, I think.
Okay. You use rooting hormone for certain things, but I think for this it roots easily enough that you probably don't need it.
That's right. So that's how you would handle, and you could pick a short one, or you could pick several short ones. Grab me that jade plant.
I don't have really any short ones.
Yes, you will make short ones. No, that's what I'm saying. You'll just chop the top off.
This plant is probably 4.5 feet in diameter.
Yeah.
And it's a little over 4 feet tall. Now, it is in a clay pot, and I've repotted it.
Right.
Not too long ago.
You can either leave it like that. You know, in San Diego, these are landscape plants, and they get about 4 or 5 feet tall, and they get that big around. So you could just leave it that way. But if it's too large, sometimes people find that their plants are just taking over their house. You know,
I think that's what's happening here.
and you feel like charging them rent.
Yeah.
And if that is your case, you chop a piece off the top, and you can take a tall piece and make a tree this tall and put it in a pot, or you can take a short piece off. you just chop it off right at the top. Now, this is a plant that we're selling here in the greenhouse, and if you come up and look at this closely, you will see that it's 3 separate pieces put in this pot, so that the pot instantly looks full, because, you know, something that's big and full appeals to people more, it's more saleable.
Yeah.
So you could do something like that. You could take 3 pieces this tall and stick them 1, 2, 3.
And you could give one to each of your children and make them feel sentimental about it so that they will keep them forever and be here in 20 years saying, this is my sentimental
They
jade
got
plant.
rather, at this point, donate it, but are the limbs susceptible, because there's some of the, one limb in particular, which is really kind of leaning, are they susceptible to breaking?
The only reason I think they're susceptible to breaking is they're so heavy.
That's exactly it.
Yeah,
the weight
they're
is so
so
heavy.
heavy.
So if you have one that's leaning already,
I have one that's probably 3 inches in diameter.
I would get out the pruning saw on that one and cut, because it's if it breaks, if it splits, that's going to be very bad for the plant. That's going to damage the plant tissue. And if you can make a clean cut, that's going to be much easier.
What's going to happen at that point where I make the clean cut? Am I going to get other little shoots off of that?
Yes.
Probably, yeah.
Below it, it will have little shoots. You might have noticed with jade plant, sometimes a leaf will fall
Yeah.
on the surface of the soil, right? And that leaf roots,
Yeah.
and that leaf grows into another plant.
it does.
So this is a plant that wants to propagate, and, you know,
You're never going to be rid of it.
yeah. So,
I hear that.
but you can definitely cut pieces off, and you can start. And I have done that several times. We have a plant that we actually stole out of our landscape when we lived in San Diego. Don't tell the landlord. In 1972, the year my husband and I got married. And it has grown up this tall at least 4 times over the course of the years. And eventually, you know, there gets to be a point when we can't lift it in and out to summer camp without causing major back damage on 3 or more people. And it dominates the room. And at that point, we cut a piece off the top, we stick it in, and we throw the rest away. Now, donating is a nice idea, but you'll find that it's more difficult to find a place that wants a big plant like that.
A 4 feet tall and 4 feet wide.
People ask us in the garden center all the time, will we take big plants? And the answer is no. Yeah. So we've started over with that plant several times, and by making it a little smaller, and then it gets big again, and then you cut off a piece, and then it gets big again. And if we know somebody who wants one, we pass it on.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Should you transplant in the cactus mix?
You could.
Yes, you could use cactus mix. In
Either
fact, I
one.
would use cactus mix. So I want to talk about this plant. This is my plant. This is pretty ugly, huh?
Let me move
This is an epiphyllum. It's very heavy. All right, watch out. Here we go. Oh, man. This is a sentimental plant.
Yeah.
In 1986, when my youngest son was 2, I used to take him 2 days a week to a home daycare. And Noreen, the daycare woman, had this plant, and it is an epiphyllum. Some people call them orchid cactus. And it, one time when I went, was covered with pink flowers.
Big, beautiful
Yeah,
flowers.
these aren't the biggest epiphyllum flowers, but these are ones that are about this big.
Still nice.
And it comes covered with these gorgeous pink flowers, and it is just beautiful. Well, over the years, since 1986, this plant, first of all, has been in this pot for far too long. It has been ignored for far too long. It's got all this dead growth on it. This is a plant that I would save by taking a cutting.
Yeah.
Right? So this is a plant that I'm going to take a piece like this. This is how Noreen gave me this plant in the first place.
Yeah.
Right? Is a cutting like this. And there are many, you know, you could take one leaf like that. You could take a collection of, say, 3 of these stems and put some rooting powder. That's how I did it when I was originally starting this plant. I put some rooting powder on it. I put them in a pot that was maybe about a 4 to 6 inch size pot. and I used seed starting mix in order to put it into root.
Because that's very lightweight. And the reason that's important is that the new roots that emerge from there are going to be tiny little hair-like roots, and they'll have a much better time growing through a lightweight potting mix than they would if you put it in something heavier or soil-based.
So seed starting mix is something that you should have in your plant rescue cupboard, all right? So that you can do cuttings in here. Anytime I want to save my geraniums, I'm not going to bring in the whole pot, but I want to save a particular type of geranium, I take cuttings of it, I stick them in some seed starting mix. And the other good thing about seed starting mix is they can stay in that mix for a good 6-8 months.
Oh yeah,
right?
I was looking for a pot so we could actually do that.
Well, we could. That's all right. We don't have to actually do it now.
Okay.
But that is how I'm going to handle this plant, and that's for some house plants. That's the way to save it. And then all this old stuff goes away. You throw it out,
Compost,
right?
yes.
So we'll cut off a whole bunch of pieces here, and I will save several of those. But then the rest of this plant is going to get tossed in the garbage. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
I didn't bring the plant with me, but I have a Christmas cactus.
Excellent.
That is turning purple at the tip. What's causing it? What do I do with it?
Where is it located?
I have two of them. One was in the sun, but the side that turned purple was away from the sun.
Well, that's interesting because
She has a Christmas cactus and has a side that turned purple away from the sun, right?
Usually, purple or red coloration on a leaf is in response to temperature or sunlight. And I'm trying to think, was it in a window that was cold?
It's by a slider.
By a slider, a door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By a door. And how long has it been in the same pot?
Heaven knows.
It could be a nutritional issue?
It might be a nutritional issue, yeah. It might be a nutritional issue. And this is a good example of sometimes we don't know what the problem is,
Yeah.
right?
But you can make your guesses. And,
Yeah.
and honestly, I would say check your temperature. CL thinks maybe refreshing the potting mix, getting it in better soil with more nutrition. And I also think you need to look at the light. The fact that it's on the side away from the light,
I thought that was strange.
I think that is strange too, because usually it's the higher sunlight that would bring
make
out
it.
the red coloration. So that confuses the heck out of me.
And anything happen, the other thing, when a plant does something on half of it, one of the things we think about is what has happened around that plant recently. Because half of it sort of argues for something cultural, and that could be too much light or
Too much heat.
too much heat, or it could be cleaning fluid used in the area,
Yeah.
or so we think about what's gone on.
Like if you have a
in that
Swiffer and the
room.
spray,
Yeah.
if you were cleaning.
One branch of it totally broke off to the ground, to the level of the ground.
Well, a Christmas cactus, I find the older Christmas cactus, that does often happen. And it's similar to the jade plant that we were discussing. The weight of the older branches does cause the exterior large branches sometimes to break off.
And with a Christmas cactus, there's a point oftentimes where they get like this.
Yeah.
With the green all out here,
And the
brown
brown in the-
stems in the middle. And this is a time that you take a cutting off of the plant, and if you want, put 3 in a pot to fill it out a little more quickly, and start again. And you throw the old plant away.
It may have been something that I bought in an estate sale. I have no idea.
Okay. Yeah. Wonderful.
It doesn't sound like it's in dire shape, but it does sound like you need to take a look. Something's wrong. Keep an eye on it. Adjust maybe the growing conditions. Maybe try it in a different location. It does want bright indirect light.
Right in your
Yeah.
Can't take hot soup.
I don't think so. And when I do put my Christmas cactus out, I bring them to summer camp, as CL says.
You send them
and,
to- yeah, good.
But I always do it in dappled light under a tree. I would never put it in full sun. Yeah.
Do you ever put a cutting in water, or do you always put it in dirt to grow?
I usually put mine in seed starting mix, and the reason I do that is, first of all, some plants don't root well in water.
Yeah.
Okay, that's number one. Some do beautifully. Coleus do beautifully, Plectranthus do beautifully, but others don't. So the other thing is, in water, you do need to change the water frequently, because if bacteria builds up in there,
And algae.
your plant can actually rot. The second reason that I use seed starting mix is that then once the plant starts to grow roots, it's set for a while.
Yeah.
I don't have to then take it and do something else to it, right, and
Yeah.
put it in a pot.
And also, sometimes the roots that develop in water don't transfer well to soil because they are different textured, they're used to absorbing water and nutrition in a different way, and they can sometimes go through a whole nother transplant shock when they're being moved from water to soil. So I think you're better off starting them in soil to begin with.
Now,
Regular
that's,
soil, can you use regular soil or is this seed starting?
Well, I'm really glad you asked that because I want to know what you mean by regular soil. It's not a trick question.
No, like a bag of the organic potting mix?
If it's a soilless mix or a lightweight mix, yes. You don't want to use a soil-based mix. I wouldn't for starting cuttings. I think it's too heavy.
Okay.
so yeah, and the exception is some potting mixes like Miracle Grow have fertilizer in them, and you probably wouldn't want to use that.
That's true.
And you also wouldn't want to use a potting mix that has those moisture crystals, quote unquote, in it. Because it can keep things too wet. I don't like moisture crystals personally.
I don't like them either, but I have a very personally embarrassing reason for not liking moisture crystals.
And can you divulge?
I will divulge. I used them for a client who didn't have irrigation. I was planting a window box, and I did not know, it was very early in my career, I did not know that you were supposed to wet the crystals before you mixed them in with the potting mix. So I used them dry, and then I watered in the window box, and I went away. And the next morning I got a phone call because the crystals had expanded and it looked like, it had pushed everything out of the window box.
They look like alien fish eggs,
Yes,
is
yeah.
how it looks. Yeah.
But you have to hydrate them before you plant them. So I made that one humiliating mistake and have stayed away from them ever since.
Yeah, well, and I stay away from them because, particularly in outside containers, because if you get a rainy summer, it ends up rotting the plants and it keeps things too wet. So that's why I stay away with them.
Yep.
I want to just mention this
Crispy fried air plant.
crispy fried air plant.
Yeah.
This is what an air plant looks like when you only give it air.
The name is misleading.
Air plants don't live on air alone. This one completely dried up. These plants need either spritzing or misting every 2 or 3 days, particularly in the winter when our houses are dry.
Do you ever dunk them?
I don't dunk them, but I have mine all on a chandelier, an old chandelier. So I just put it in the bathtub and I spritz it, and then I shake it off. And then in the summertime, I hang that chandelier under my arbor.
Nice.
And so it's decorative, it looks nice. They grow
Yeah.
under the arbor in the summer. And in the summertime, I can just take the hose and squirt it every couple of days.
I just have a couple, and I keep them in candlestick holders, so I do just take them and dunk them in water and then let them dry.
Yeah, yeah.
In Sansevieria, that the older leaves are starting to sort of flop over. I don't know why.
On which plant?
Sansevieria.
Oh, Sansevieria. They get huge, and there are some varieties that get bigger than others. And my guess is you've got a variety that gets really big leaves,
And
right?
they do, even this kind, I've seen this with,
The leaves are as tall as the tallest ones.
yeah.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that are
Yeah.
popping.
And the thing is, you know, a plant out in nature, if that plant was growing out wherever they're native to, South Africa maybe? I think
Sure,
they're-
let's go with that.
I think they're maybe
I don't
native
know.
to
Or
Africa.
s-
But wherever they're native to and they're outside, the wind is blowing them, right? They get brushed by whatever animal goes by, and they get strong for that reason. We grow them in the house where they're under no environmental stress. And you know,
And the light is lower.
and the light is
and
lower,
that makes them thinner.
and they grow bigger, but they're weaker as a result. Now, you can, you know, if it was my plant, if it was all the leaves that were doing that, just a few. I'd probably just cut off the ones that were flopping
At the base.
at the base so that it still looks great. You'll never know they're gone. The plant will put out new growth in response, and that's how I'd handle the situation. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm stressed about your cut-off leaves. How long can you leave those without getting them planted?
That's a great question. She asked, she's stressed about the cut-off leaves.
She's worried.
So
The fact is, no. This
I'm
is
thirsty.
this is
Ellen, help me.
I will not. You cannot have anything to drink. This is a very succulent plant.
Yeah.
And when you take cuttings of succulent plants, you actually don't want to plant this right away. You want to let it callus a little bit. The same goes for
The jade plant.
Jade plant, yeah.
If you cut off a big arm of the jade plant, you can leave it overnight to kind of callus off a little bit.
If you
and
plant it right
then
away,
you plant it.
you may even introduce rot. So you actually want these to air dry a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you wouldn't want, if you
can
took a
relax.
cutting of a more tender plant,
Right.
you wouldn't do that
No.
because it would wilt. If I took a cutting of this winter jasmine, it would just wilt if I left it for several hours,
And
right?
then, yeah, you would put it right into the root
Yeah.
tone and right into.
So you would put it right into the rooting and right into moist potting mix, and that would
Yeah.
get it, keep it alive. But with a succulent plant like this, and the thicker the leaves, the longer it can be out of water. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Great questions, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah.
I had a question about a spider plant.
Spider plant.
It was too big to bring in,
Okay.
and I tried to transplant it, but I didn't know if it likes a pot that's almost root bound or whether it needs a little more around the outside.
I love spider plant, and it's because my mother loves spider plant. And it's an important plant to her, and so I love it too. And this is a plant that Irma Bombeck says doesn't know the meaning of the words birth control.
Yeah.
Constantly having babies, right? Now, I don't know about you, Ellen, but if my spider plant was getting too large, I wouldn't repot it. I'd take some of the babies
And
and
plant
put them
them,
in a new
yeah.
pot and start over.
But I like it being big.
Uh-huh.
Will it still propagate all right, or is there a point where it
If you like it being big, you could do to this plant what we did to that Bilbergio, which is take it out and saw it in half. And then you'd have two good-sized ones, and they would continue to grow. If you've ever repotted a spider plant, you've noticed that beneath the soil, they've got these.
The roots are huge.
Yeah, they're very succulent,
Huge.
very juicy,
Yeah.
store a lot of water. So that, again, that's a tough root system. You can cut right through that. So if you like the idea of it being big, but you don't want to move it up one pot size, you don't have to just take the little babies, although that is a good way, and that's probably what I would do. But you can cut that in half.
I'd be lazy, and that's how I do it.
Yeah.
So
I can't grow that plant.
you can't grow that plant?
Yeah. You know
No.
why?
Why?
Because I have a cat.
And are they poisonous?
No.
The cat bats it.
No. The cat, you know how cats go outside and eat grass and then they throw up? This is a monocot, and cats will, given a choice of 10 or 15 plants, go straight for the spider plant, eat it, and then throw up. And so I have stopped growing
Charming.
spider plants because I don't really need that in my house.
Charming.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I love spider plants, and someday I'll.
Yeah. No, you can't grow them. Yeah. Yes, in the back.
Is A and B, is a fertilizer that says good for all houseplants really good? And do you use Epsom salt ever?
Okay, great question.
I'm going to get some visuals over here.
Okay, she's
Yeah.
going to get some visuals.
Yeah.
First of all, the first question was, is there a fertilizer that's good for all plants? And there are good general houseplant fertilizers,
Yes.
right? This is one of them, Liquid Plant Food by Bonide 10-10-10. This is one that if you wanted to keep things simple for most houseplants, you get something like this, you use it according to directions, and you never water a thirsty plant. And you're done, okay? So that's a way of
one
making
thing.
it easy.
Yeah. This here is labeled African violet plant food, but you could use this for any plant that you wanted to flower. And instead of 10-10-10, which indicates a balanced plant food, this is 7-10-7. The first number stands for nitrogen, the second stands for potassium, and the third one stands for phosphorus. And the middle number, the potassium, is what we call a bloom booster. So if you want a flowering houseplant fertilizer, look for something with a higher middle number, and that's going to be a bloom booster. You don't always need it, but if you have something, if you have an African violet that hasn't bloomed for you in a while and you want to give it a little kickstart, it doesn't have to be African violet food, but it should be something with a higher middle number to indicate that it's for boosting bloom.
Question on that, do they ever lose their strength with age?
I don't.
African violets or fertilizers?
Fertilizers.
I think if you keep it in a balanced temperature, I think it's fine. But what I would always say to people, if you have any question about the viability of any garden product, on the back of most containers is a number that you can call for information or a website. And this one has a website.
I don't
okay?
see an expiration.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, it does have an expiration date.
Does have an
Well,
expiration
maybe
date?
that's not expiration. I don't know.
It's hard to tell.
Yeah, I don't see an obvious expiration date on here.
But I would never hesitate to call a company and say, I've had this fertilizer, it's been in my garage for 6 or 8 years, is it still good? And they'll tell you.
Does that also help with bug spray?
Bug spray is similar, and you would never want to save any insecticide or fungicide or herbicide that's been mixed up with water, because that does change it.
Yep.
So if you've mixed it up with water, use it up or pour it out, never store it, and then use it later. That's a good general rule.
Yeah. And don't store it in you can store it in the bottle that it came in, but if you've been using it in a pump sprayer, don't store it in the pump sprayer either, because that can clog up the tubes and the pump mechanism.
Do you believe in fertilizing all houseplants?
Do I believe in fertilizing all houseplants? I believe in looking to see how your plant looks and making the decision based on the plant.
Yeah.
What about you?
I'm very lazy, so I don't fertilize very often.
See, I do fertilize, but I tend to go with mixing an organic fertilizer like plant tone or flower tone or rose
Yeah.
tone when I plant. I also periodically top dress with earthworm castings, and if I see that a plant looks like it needs a boost, then I will fertilize
And that's
it.
the key. I tend to not fertilize until I feel like the plant is telling me that it's lacks something. Yeah.
Right. That's right.
No,
That's right.
I don't do it every time I water. I don't do it every other time I water.
Well, we have reached just about the end of our time.
I think so.
And I want to thank the folks at Hyannis Country Garden here today for letting us mess up the greenhouse.
Yeah, we're going to
And
clean it up, we promise.
We are going to clean it up. And I want to thank all of you for bringing in your tired,
Yes, thank
your
you so
poor,
much. Give yourselves a
and,
hand, yeah.
We want you to have fun with your plants.
Thank you.